So when our genetic blueprint goes faulty and our immune system is no longer picking up these defective cells, then the cell growth can get out of hand. And it's this out of control cell growth that we refer to as cancer. A healthy immune system then is a key component in reducing our risk of cancer. Now, aside from an inadequate or weak immune system, are there other factors that could increase our risk of cancer? Well, yes. We know that cancer tends to show up in areas of chronic low-grade inflammation. In 2005, the National Cancer Institute reported that this kind of inflammation was related to both the initiation and the progression of cancer. Encouragingly, when these inflammation levels go down, the cancer survival usually goes up.
Welcome to our past attendees. Welcome to some new people. I want to just give a shout out to a group of people called the Plant Chicks Tribe, to Jackie Marcia and her group of individuals who are now getting involved in CHIP. So welcome to everyone. Before I start with what we're going to discuss today, I just want to remind everyone, put your questions in the chat box so that we can answer some questions and discuss some questions at the second half of the program. And also to remind everyone, invite your friends, invite your family to join the program. I think there's a lot of good information that we get from the monologue, from the videos, from the questions and answers and all that discussion. So actually, I want to also thank the LMI producer for the show, Daryl Ludington. Daryl and I always get on the computer for about an hour in advance just to make sure all the technical things are done, and I could not do this program without him, so thank you, Daryl. When we talk about cancer, that is probably one of the most confusing and upsetting words that you can tell a patient. It really seems like so often that you use that word and you can end up really just seeing a patient with a blank stare across his or her face. You really have to approach it in a very sensitive way because cancer is a very scary topic. And we'll talk about today and listen to some videos about cancer itself, what the definition is, what is a tumor, what are the risk factors and such. So it's the abnormal growth of cells, and cells are supposed to grow in a certain way, but not get out of control. And as Hans mentioned, it's really important to also think about what do we do to boost our immune system and to lower inflammation. And inflammation is something that I've talked about numerous times in previous shows and in presentations that I've done. Inflammation really seems to be the common denominator for all chronic illnesses that we deal with, and also for many of the cancers. So we're going to look next at the first clip that talks about what cancer really is, and then we'll get into what tumors are and risk factors and carcinogens and such. So we'll look at clip number 1 next.
But what exactly is cancer? Well, let's take a look at some biology. You know, every day the cells in our body grow and renew themselves. It's a process that is controlled by the cell's inherent genetic blueprint. Under normal circumstances, the cell grows, develops, and plays its assigned role in the body. Even when some cells become defective through a process of mutation, the body can handle this in that these defective cells usually are picked up and fixed by our immune system, which is sort of a police system where, for instance, natural killer cells can get activated as primary tumor-fighting cells. Now, interestingly enough, cancer cells can develop from any type of tissue in the body, which helps us to understand why so many different types of cancers can occur. Some of these cells may be benign. They don't spread, they're contained, they're not dangerous. But other cells may be malignant. They spread to different parts of the body. They're not contained, they're dangerous.
So he mentions benign and malignant. So benign tumors, and the next clip We'll hear more about what is a tumor. So tumors can be benign. They can also be cancerous, which means that they continue to grow out of control. And obviously the prognosis is very different. If there's a benign, non-malignant or non-cancerous tumor in the body, that's something that portends a better prognosis. So when you're talking to your patients or your clients, you can come across with more hope, if you will. And cancer obviously is a very different story. So we'll look next at clip 2, which really gives us an idea of what the difference is between a tumor and cancer. So we'll look at that clip next.
But what then is a tumor? Well, a tumor is a mass of these abnormal cells. When some of these cells break off and leave the tumor and travel via the bloodstream or the lymphatic system to different parts of the body, then we talk about a cancer that has metastasized. The main reason why cancer is so devastating lies in the fact that cancer can stop vital organs from working properly. Cancer shuts down the body.
You know, and it's really important when you're discussing an abnormal mass that's found in the body. And I had a patient recently that had a mass, and right away the discussion always goes to the diagnosis of cancer. It's important to understand that when you're in that conversation, you really want to wait before you start talking about what the specifics of the diagnosis is, because it could be a benign tumor that's in there, a non-cancerous or non-malignant tumor. It could be cancer. So the important part of this message is the fact that you really want to wait to be sure that you know what the problem is. In this recent patient, the patient actually had an infection that looked like a mass. So you don't want to jump the gun, if you will, and start making a diagnosis before a pathological diagnosis is made. You typically have to somehow biopsy or take cells from the mass itself. So now we're hearing about what is cancer, what is a tumor, and we really have to start to think about, why do these things happen in the first place? What is it that actually increases the risk and increases the incidence of cancers and tumors? And we hear about the word carcinogens, and we talk about lifestyle risk factors. So in the next clip, we're going to hear more about that, and I'm going to emphasize more what the lifestyle risk factors are, so that we can eventually help our patients and our clients to lower their risk of cancers and tumors. So we'll look at clip 3 next.
What in the world causes the damage to the genetic blueprint of these cells? A number of carcinogens have been identified and established as cancer-causing substances. But aside from carcinogens, research is now showing that certain lifestyle choices, too, can increase our risk of developing certain forms of cancer. In fact, the World Health Organization has now linked some 30% of all cancer deaths to 5 leading behavioral and dietary factors. Here they are. Number 1, tobacco use. Tobacco is the largest single lifestyle-related risk factor globally, responsible for 71% of all lung cancer deaths and 20% of all cancer deaths. Number 2, excess weight. Several mechanisms and theories relate excess weight to an increase of cancer risk. There is the chronic low-level inflammation, which is associated with excess weight, in that fat cells have been shown to produce pro-inflammatory substances. Now then there is number 3, lack of physical activity. Being active helps with maintaining a healthy weight. Being active strengthens our immune system, and being more active also increases our antioxidant capacity, which helps again control inflammation. Then there is alcohol use. Even moderate alcohol use has been associated with an increased risk of cancer, particularly for breast cancer. Even 1 drink a day increases the risk by 10%, and the risk significantly increases with every additional drink. And then there's number 5, food choices. Low fruit and vegetable consumption is associated with a higher cancer risk. There are most likely a number of ways in which whole plant foods are protective, from providing vitamins and minerals to boost our immune system, to providing antioxidants to combat inflammation. By filling our plates with more fruits and vegetables, we are also leaving less and less space for foods such as meat and dairy products, which are associated with an increased risk of certain cancers. So let's summarize. If you smoke, stop. If you carry extra weight, start working on that. If you're not yet into exercise, make it part of your daily lifestyle. And then avoid alcohol consumption and avoid diets low in fruits and vegetables and high in meat and dairy products.
So before we look at the next slide, which really is more about lifestyle and fruits and vegetable consumption and exercise, it's called the Wheel Study, I just want to emphasize one of the things that was mentioned. The World Health Organization within the last year or so put out a position statement that very clearly stated that red meats and processed meats are carcinogens. So basically what they were saying is that red meat and processed meats like lunch meats and hot dogs and sausages and everything that's a processed meat directly causes cancer. And it's really interesting that a lot of healthcare providers do not talk to their patients about that. And it's really something that is so important when we see the rising risk of breast cancer and prostate and colon and skin cancer and the list goes on and on. We really have to make sure that as healthcare providers, which we all are, we bring this information to our patients and our clients and our family and friends to say, hey, listen, there's this information out there that specifically is saying now that red and processed meats cause cancer or carcinogens. We really need to start changing our food choices. So that's the World Health Organization. It was also mentioned that cigarettes or tobacco increases the risk of cancer, which it certainly does. And a really interesting a piece that I heard on the radio today was talking about vaping, the substitute for smoking cigarettes now, and how that probably was really ridiculous, in my opinion, how they were saying that it probably increases the risk of COVID, of the coronavirus. We really have to think about what we do from a lifestyle perspective, because if you're putting something in your lungs that's not air, that's not oxygen, you have to know logically that that is going to cause a problem at some point. So for any of you on the line that vape, anybody that's on the line that knows someone that uses vaping cigarettes, not only does anything that you put in your lungs increase the risk of cancer, but it also increases the risk of contracting coronavirus. So we'll look next at the slide that is about the Wheel Study, which really gives us some more indication of what happens with lifestyle. And you can see here, when you have enough fruit and vegetables and exercise, the likelihood of dying from breast cancer was less than 5%. And then when we go to the next part of the slide, when there's enough fruit and vegetable in your diet, but no exercise, the likelihood of dying from breast cancer now is 10%, so that doubled. And we'll see on the next part of the graph, enough exercise, but not enough fruit and vegetables, we're still at around 10%. And then in the last one here, this jumps to about 11% now when you don't get enough fruits and vegetables in your diet and you're not exercising. And I really wish if I could rework this slide, I would have it say enough vegetables and some fruits, because I think there's more nutrition, more of the antioxidants and vitamins and minerals in all of the vegetables that we have available to us. Certainly fruits are very important because they also have vitamins and minerals and fiber and things that are healthy. But I always try to emphasize 5 to 9 servings of vegetables and fruits per day so that people get all of that into the system. And as far as lifestyle choices, there are other things, and there's for the CHIP facilitators, when you're showing these videos, a lot of the information talks about hormones such as estrogen and how estrogen lowers, or estrogen itself when it's high increases your risk of cancer, and other toxins also contribute to cancers. How we can do things to boost our immune system, to decrease inflammation in the body so that we're lowering the overall risk of all of the cancers. When we look at the research around breast cancer, a lot of the research in that area is similar to what happens on the male side with prostate cancer, because pathophysiologically, those two cancers are somewhat similar. So we have to look at meat and dairy and how that affects the risk and the incidence of breast cancer, and also prostate cancer, colon cancer with red meat and processed meats, obviously tobacco smoking and probably vaping with lung cancer, and then skin cancers that are really always part of the equation, including melanomas. The discussion also comes up in relation to dairy products. What does that actually do to the risk of breast cancer and prostate cancer? And the research actually shows that as you increase the intake of dairy, of cow's milk and cheese and everything else that's in the world of dairy, you increase the risk of prostate cancer, you increase the risk of breast cancer, and that probably has a lot to do with what they talk about in one of the videos, insulin-like growth factor. Anything that contributes to the growth of cells can oftentimes create these cells that continue to replicate, get out of control, become masses or tumors, and then become cancers if that process continues. As Dr. Deal mentioned, we also know that animal products are a contributor, as I mentioned before, in relation to the World Health Organization report, and we really need to be sure to lower all of those things in our diet. The next clip will talk about what do we really do now that we have all this information. What do we do to help ourselves, to help our families, our friends, and our patients to lower the risk of cancer, to lower the risk of tumors in general? So we'll look at clip 4 next, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that one.
Here are several recommendations for reducing cancer risks. They were made by the World Cancer Research Fund, representing the who is who among the world's best researchers. Here are some of the recommendations. Number 1, be as lean as possible within the normal range of body weight. Now you see, excess weight is the common denominator for a number of chronic diseases, including cancer. Quote, maintenance of a healthy weight throughout life may be one of the most important ways to protect against cancer. This will also protect against a number of other common chronic diseases, end of quote. Here's number 2, be physically active as part of everyday life. And for cancer prevention, the World Cancer Research Fund recommends to be moderately active for at least 30 minutes every day, and as fitness improves, to aim for 60 minutes or more a day. Better still, if you can, get active outdoors to enjoy the benefits of regular sunshine. Now here's number 3, limit consumption of energy-dense foods and sugary drinks. You see, a high consumption of calorie-rich foods and drinks are linked with increased rates of excess weight. High consumption of sugary drinks, such as soft drinks, providing large amounts of empty calories, are not in our best interest. So that brings us to number 4, eat mostly foods of plant origin. Whole food plant-based diets tend to be low in energy density and high in fiber, high in nutrients and antioxidants. The trick here is to eat as many of these plant foods as close to the natural state as possible, in that processing and refining may strip them of many of their nutrients and beneficial effects. So that brings us to number 5, limit intake of red meat and avoid processed meat. High meat diets then are not only linked with a high risk of cancer, but because of their energy density and their inadequate fiber, they may also contribute to overweight and diabetes. And because they're also high in saturated fat and cholesterol, they contribute in a major way to the circulation-related diseases. And that brings us to number 6, limit alcoholic drinks. The World Cancer Research Fund expert report states, the evidence does not show a clear level of consumption of alcoholic drinks below which there is no increase in risk of the cancers it causes. This means that based solely on the evidence on cancer, even small amounts of alcoholic drinks should be avoided. And here is number 7. Limit consumption of salt. Now, if links to hypertension and stroke weren't bad enough, a diet high in salt has also been linked to an increased risk of stomach cancer. Finally, let's not forget that quitting smoking is the single most effective way of significantly reducing your risk of cancer.
So it's really interesting. I mean, with each presentation that we listen to, and when we really talk about what is helpful and healthful, we always get back to the same things: food and exercise and avoiding toxins and getting enough sleep, all of the pillars of lifestyle medicine. We know from the research and from the anecdotal reports that have come out since the coronavirus pandemic that obesity significantly increases the risk of not only getting the infection, getting this viral infection, but also increasing the risk of death. So that is really something that we need to focus on. Dr. Deal mentioned getting outside and exercising. That helps you to get vitamin D, which is almost like a hormone, which really contributes to health. He talked again about decreasing the consumption of sugar and salt and fat in the diet, getting the animal products out of your diet. So a lot of this is redundant, but it's purposefully redundant in that the message that we should be providing as healthcare providers to all of our patients and friends and family and everyone that you talk to is that lifestyle factors make a tremendous effect, have a tremendous impact on whether or not you're on that road towards health and wellness, or you're on the road to disease and disability and early death and decreased longevity. Before we move on to questions, and hopefully some people have put questions in the chat box, I want to thank Dr. Deal also for the great videos that he's produced for us over the years, and also to let you know in next week's show, next week's program, August 19th, the topic is going to be understanding your blood results. And Dr. Deal is actually going to be a guest on the show. So I'm looking forward to that and having that discussion with him. If you don't know, Hans is the founder of the CHIP program. He's been involved in this program since the inception, obviously as the founder, and he's still involved in a tremendously effective way. So we really have to thank him for his leadership and his support and his being such a great champion for healthy living. So let's see. Here's a question: do men and women get cancers at the same rate? Well, obviously the cancers that people get are different. When we look at breast cancer, obviously women get breast cancer more often than men, but men do get breast cancer, and I've had several over the years that I've been in practice. If a man has a lump in the breast, in that area, they do actually need a mammogram, and they need to have a biopsy if the lump is there, same kind of workup. So the rates are different depending on what type of cancer you're talking about. Men and women get skin cancers, men and women get colon cancer. When men and women have more of the animal products, they probably have the same rate of colon cancer. You'll also have to think about family history. The rates differ when there is a difference in the genetic susceptibility. And we know that, as an example, colon cancer, when an individual has a first-degree relative that has had colon cancer, that person, the sibling or one of the first-degree relatives, should have their colonoscopy about 10 years earlier than normal, which is usually around 50. So the answer to the question really is it depends on the type of cancer. But when you start looking at risk factors, at lifestyle risk factors, when you look at genetic susceptibility, we can start to help individuals really understand what their risk is for cancer and chronic disease. Next one says, I always wondered why some yogis live as vegetarians but die of cancer. I'm not sure that I completely understand that question, but you know, even when, if I do understand it correctly, even when people live a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet, sometimes they still get cancer or they still get a chronic illness. There is some genetic susceptibility for sure. but we don't know everything about why cancers develop. But the important part of the message is, for the things that we do know, we should really take heed of those things. If you know that putting anything in your lungs, whether it be tobacco smoke or vaping or anything else, increases your risk of lung problems, emphysema, asthma, lung cancer, whatever, obviously we should avoid those things. So we really have to be logical in our decisions. And again, make sure that the decisions that you make on a regular basis prioritize health above everything else. Because when you lose your health, all of your other priorities go down the drain. So it doesn't really matter what else is a priority for that day. If you make poor lifestyle choices and you lose your health, everything else goes to pot. So you really take that as a message every day. Do you recommend soy consumption for breast cancer survivors? You know, Dr. Michael Greger did a great meta-analysis. If you don't look at his work, you really should. Nutritionfacts.org. Michael Greger, Dr. Michael Greger is a great authority on nutrition, the science of nutrition. And he looked at this, this topic. Soy products, and if you just simply compare the incidence of breast and prostate cancer in the United States versus in Asia, where people start eating soy products very early on, it's really a big part of their staple. If it were true that soy increases the risk of cancer, we would absolutely see that, and we actually see the opposite. Those individuals that eat more soy have a lower risk of breast cancer and a lower risk of prostate cancer. So yes, you can definitely have soy as a breast cancer survivor. It's rarely an issue. Occasionally it becomes an issue with thyroid, but as I mentioned before, I've only had 2 patients in my career that have had problems with their thyroid as a result of eating a lot of soy. What are my feelings on raw vegetables versus cooked? There's a great book called Eat on the Wild Side. It might actually be on the shelf behind me, but it's a really good book that helps you to understand which foods are better eaten, which produce foods are better eaten raw, which ones should be lightly cooked, which ones should be more cooked, if you will. We know that tomatoes, when they're lightly cooked, actually the cooking itself brings out the nutrients. Dr. Greger actually taught me a while back that chopping your cruciferous vegetables brings out the enzyme that brings out the chemicals in the broccoli and cauliflower and such that is more healthful. So it really is important to know that. But even if you don't want to read the book, that's fine, because what you should basically do is eat a mix. Eat some raw vegetables, eat some that are cooked. You can actually microwave broccoli for just a short period of time to heat it up, and it's actually more healthful that way. Which foods should breast cancer patients avoid? I think everyone, regardless of whether you are a breast cancer survivor or not, or any other cancer survivor, should be avoiding animal products. I think the research, the literature, the anecdotal stories that you will hear from physicians and scientists and researchers over and over and over again is that animal products, meat, chicken, dairy, contribute to all of the diseases that we see on a regular basis and to many of the cancers. So I know some people really don't like to hear that, but you have to look at the reality of what happens to people when they eat animal products. When you're eating animal protein, we know that there is a higher risk of chronic disease, a higher risk of cancer. You're exposing yourself to multiple antibiotics and hormones and pesticides and herbicides, bacteria, virus, fecal material, all sorts of contaminants. So when you look at your food, you should really ask yourself the question, is this food healthy? Is it going to put me on that road, as I mentioned before, to greater health and wellness and vitality? Or is it going to lead me down to that road where I'm seeing my doctor more often than I would like to? I'm in the hospital more often than I would like to. I'm spending more money on medicines and such. So I think we really have to be very clear about what the science shows. And a general question, has anyone done a study to see if the younger population with COVID are e-cigarette smokers? I think that that's what this program that I was listening to this morning was actually alluding to. They're trying to understand why the coronavirus has such a dramatic effect on people's health. And obviously a major part of that is pulmonary disease. So many of these individuals really have ended up on ventilators, and unfortunately a lot of people have expired as a result of that. So I think we're getting more and more information, but again, just being logical about what your health is all about. If you know that you're doing something that is not helpful to your body, then we really should change that behavior. So changing behavior, this is really what the CHIP program is all about. It's giving people the information with a specific tool that I think the CHIP program is, to take that knowledge and put it into action. And you're putting that information into action in your kitchen, when you go out to a restaurant, when you go to friends' homes, and you're using that information with the tools that you get from the CHIP program to make logical, healthful, and helpful decisions for yourself, your family, your friends, and your patients. So I think that's the end of questions. We're just a few minutes over. But again, I want to thank everyone for being involved in the show. With each program, we have more and more people participating, but I would love to see thousands of people on the line. So tell your family and friends, speak to your physician about it. If you're a healthcare provider, if you're a CHIP facilitator, please align with physicians that can help bring this knowledge to their patients. Do more CHIP programs, because what you're really doing is you're spreading the knowledge that allows people to stay healthier, to be vital, to live in that wellness arena, and to really contribute a lot to their lives. So thank you for everyone being involved. I really appreciate everyone being here. And again, August 19th, we will have Dr. Hans Diehl on the show. So I will look forward to next week to seeing you all again. Thank you and God bless.